Hi, I'm Old Norse Specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford. It's worth keeping in mind that Snorri Sturluson, in writing his Prose Edda, is writing essentially a secondary source. He is trying to explain the myths that have been preserved from many generations, many centuries before his lifetime, in poetry, but he's not creating new stories. He sometimes kind of overdoes it, I think, in interpreting those stories, but I don't think that he's ever creating new stories out of whole cloth. One thing that he wants to do, though, is he kind of feels like he doesn't have enough information and doesn't have enough to fill out these long lists that he wants to make. You know, who counts as a god, who counts as a goddess, etc. And there are two occasions in the Prose Edda when he makes long lists of goddesses. One list makes more sense than the other. The list that starts the section called Skoldskaparmol includes essentially all the goddesses that we ever actually hear stories about in the poems. You know, we hear about Frigg, Froya, Gefjun, Idun, Skadi, and all of these we know real stories about. But he has a list of many more names. I want to say 16 names in Gylfaginning, the longer first part of the Prose Edda, which is the part that more people read. And there he lists all these different names. You know, he says that there's an Eir, who's a goddess of healing. He says there's a Sjoven, who's a goddess of love, a Loven, who's a goddess of who gets to be a couple or something like that. And there's no actual source for any of these in Eddic poems, right? If you read the Poetic Edda, those poems are mostly actually passed down from the pre-Christian period. You never see anything about these goddesses. The most that you ever see is that their names come up in kennings, that is, poetic circumlocutions for saying other things. And part of the art of the kenning is, uh, any god's name can stand for man. So Balder of weapons, that just means man. Thor of spears, that just means man. Same way, any goddess name can mean woman. Frigg of jewelry, Freya of the necklace, that just means woman. So Eir, for example, can be used the same way. Eir of necklaces, Gisli Sorson in the saga of Gisli Sorson uses that, or something like that, in a kenning, as a kenning for woman in one of his skaldic poems. What I think is happening is Snorri is seeing these words, whatever they ultimately mean, in kennings and assuming that they are other goddess names, just like Frigg and Freya and Gefjun, and that he just doesn't know what the story is. How he decides what their role is, how he decides that Eir, this random word that comes up in kennings for women, is a goddess of healing, I don't know. He made us feel like there needs to be a goddess of healing. But notice the way that in our legitimate myths, the gods and goddesses really are not roles, right? They're personalities. If you read all of the poems in the Poetic Edda, you come away with a pretty good sense of who Thor is. You come away with a good sense of his character, what it would be like to spend time with Thor. But you don't really come away with a good sense of his character sheet. You don't really come away with the sense of, like, is he stronger than Tyr, or is Tyr stronger than he is? Does he have more hit points than Tyr, or does Tyr have more hit points? It's not a monster manual, right? Things aren't classified the same way in the living tradition of the literature of paganism. And Snorri wants to classify, he wants to make lists, not quite as bad as we do, but he's already kind of doing that. And I think that we have to keep that in mind. Um, so even though ChatGPT or most websites that you'll ever read, which I guess are increasingly written by AI, kind of just take for granted that his list of 16 goddesses, where this is the one who's the goddess of healing, this is the one who's the goddess of love, is based on something. I think that it makes a lot more sense for us to read through the myths ourselves and conclude from those readings who is responsible for what, who are the actual gods and goddesses that people told stories about, who were part of a living tradition in the pagan period before the conversion to Christianity. And we'll see that there are important goddesses, again, Frigg, Freya, Gefjun, Idun, Skavi, but that they don't include these names that Snorri throws into his long list in Gylfaginning. Well, Thanks so much for your time, and from beautiful Wyoming, I'm wishing you all the best. I'm here at Grimfrost World Headquarters Longhouse with Johan Hegg, and I just want to remind you that if you have Viking needs, you have a Viking supplier. Grimfrost really cares about getting things right. And if you need replica, well, anything, right? Shields, helmets, weapons, board games, cool t-shirts, hats, all sorts of accessories like that. You can get them at grimfrost.com together with my books, and they ship just about anywhere in the world. So check them out. It does help support the channel.